Unabated, that's kind of too big a word. That's like mayonnaise. I'm sure that's the biggest word I know.
All right. Welcome on into Cover 2 college football player props for your semifinal matchups. We've got Penn State and Notre Dame, and we have Texas versus the Ohio State University. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me as always, the realist, Chris Kay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on into Cover 2. Chris, we have 3 games left in the college football season here. We got the semifinal matchups, Texas and Ohio State playing tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Hopefully the ice and snow doesn't delay it. But yeah, tomorrow night, that's the plan.
Yeah. And I think we should be okay. That's right. That game's going on down in Georgia, right?
No, that's the championship's in Georgia. This one's in Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah
Dallas, I don't know if you know, years ago had a big snowstorm and it just shut down the city, the state for 4 days in some places.
I remember that. And then there was they had to deal with stuff during the Super Bowl as well a couple of years back when they hosted it. But anyway, games in a dome, so we don't have to worry about the weather other than the extenuating circumstances surrounding the game. But we've also got Penn State versus Notre Dame tonight. And the headline that's coming out right now, and the thing that maybe we need to be a little bit concerned about, how are you feeling about this flu outbreak in the Fighting Irish camp?
Didn't see this coming, but I just read a minute ago from a Notre Dame beat guy that it sounds like a lot of it's backups and special teamers. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like we're going to be okay. Not a lot of starters impacted, but you never really know. He could just be saying what he thinks. It could be completely wrong. So there's a lot of indecision and things that are going on. Sounds like Penn State's got food poisoning.
Yeah.
So they also have some issues too.
Jesus.
So I don't know. Maybe they had a Chipotle or something, but we'll see. I think ultimately everything will be fine. I think Notre Dame has a big injury issue, and that's the big thing to think about and worry about. But otherwise, I think, which is nice, both games are going to be super straightforward. We don't have to do I don't think we have to do a lot of guessing besides that Notre Dame running back room.
Yeah. Jared Ruby is saying he's glad he didn't bet that Montana State one that he asked about. That's good. And then Jackson Dart for the W says the Gambler 44. But Andrew Katz absolutely loved the promo picture. We do have plenty of props to talk about here, and we're going to want to talk about the game, the games from, let's face it, we've only got 2 games. We may as well talk about some sides and totals as well.
Sure.
But before we do any of that, I feel like I'm in the camp that Ohio State is going to be in the national title game. And that means we are likely getting Chris Day back next week on the thumbnail. And so I feel that I have to show what did not make this week's thumbnail. We were almost going to have Alabama Chris on the show this week. The thumbnail would have also had the Indiana Jones font. It would have been absolutely fantastic. I'm putting it up one more time.
The double chin is perfect. It's very really well done to the team. The Unabated team that handles these weekly are great. I can't even get mad about it. They're that good.
Absolute shout out to Justin Long, our absolute goat of a graphics guy when it comes to dealing with all this. Also just phenomenal on the socials. So we love Justin. Shout out to him for the fantastic work that he's put in all season long on those. We really appreciate it. But we are here today to talk about the college football playoff prop games that we've got going on here. But let's start with tonight, Notre Dame, Penn State. Before we get into the prop lines themselves, Chris, what are you feeling when it comes to the game lines that we've got in this one? Whoop.
I mean, I think this one is going to be probably the more slugfest, boring, physical game. Whereas I think Ohio State, Texas has a lot of skill talent that just is super impressive between Matthew Golden, who's blown up in the playoffs in the last couple of games for Texas. And then also obviously Jeremiah Smith, who I think he'd be a first round pick if he could enter the NFL draft today. Right. So there's some insane skill guys in that second game. I think tonight we like a lot of unders. And I think it's just strictly because this is Notre Dame, who we saw through for 90 yards last week. And then Penn State, who loves to run the football and not, Drew Allers had his passing line around 180 to 200 the entire season. So these are just the styles of football that they play. And so should be a good game. I think obviously it's a 1-point spread. Essentially, I think it'll be super tight. Whereas I think that Ohio State game, we might see one team pull it away. I could see both sides doing it, but I can't imagine this Notre Dame game not ending like within a touchdown or within a field goal. I think it's going to be that tight of a game.
Daniel was a little impatient to get going. Thomas feels like the end boss of running into that person who you kind of know wants to stop and chat when you're in a hurry. I know. We've got 2 games and a lot of time to fill here. We got to be a little bit longer with it. But I agree with you. It's going to be 2 such interesting matchups. And I know, no hard feelings, Dan. I know you're just busting me. I think the only thing that I'm feeling confident in is Ohio State. Like, they just feel like they're a lot better. And I feel like Quinn Ewers is going to be on a really short leash here.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State, isn't it weird how everybody is all in on Ohio State?
It is. And I hate that I'm with everybody else on this. Trust me.
It's like when everybody in your friend group thinks that like a team's going to cover or win, and you immediately just have regrets and just know the opposite's going to happen. Like it almost feels too obvious. I mean, Texas is an incredible team, right? They're here for a reason. They played Georgia tight back when they had a real quarterback. Like they have talent everywhere. Their secondary is incredible. Like if there's a secondary that could stop Jeremiah Smith, it's Texas, right? They have probably 2 first-rounders in their secondary. They have, I think one big thing for Texas is that their offensive line looks like it's going to be healthy. Their left tackle missed the game against Georgia and it hurt. And then I think their right tackle or right guard missed this past game against Arizona State. Seems like both are going to be back. And I think they'll be able to run the ball better because of it. So I don't like either of these 2 teams, Texas or Ohio State. So I'm kind of whatever. I just will root for my props and the stuff that we give out. But I think Texas is being undersold here. 6 is a lot of points for a team in the SEC that was essentially, 1 or 2 in the SEC. I know that obviously Georgia beat them twice, but like they're right up there with Georgia in the SEC. It feels like a lot of disrespect. And I think Sarkisian could easily play into that and get his guys motivated for it.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is a lot of prisoner in the moment with Ohio State coming off the big Oregon win and Texas barely scraping by against Arizona State. And let's face it, they almost should have lost that game. They were in the driver's seat and then they completely blew it. And then they managed to get bailed out there. And Daniel points out sharp people I know are all on Texas +6 for what it's worth. Not at all surprised to hear that information. I know that I am on just the absolute chalk side of this game. I think I'm more inclined to think that the Oregon game is what we saw from Ohio State there is the real Ohio State. And the Michigan game was the one where you want to kind of just throw out the records and say, okay, it was Ohio State.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of Michigan just kind of like being in the head of Ryan Day. Like Ryan Day's an incredible coach, but he is truly that, like Michigan is that team that has just given them fits when they're the same level of talent or worse or better. It's always giving them fits. I think Texas can be really physical with the offensive line being strong. They have a couple great running backs. Like I just think they can be physical like Michigan was, and they have more talent than Michigan. So I think they could give them fits. But, at the end of the day, if Texas comes into it and tries to defend the passing attack like Oregon did, then this game is over, right? Like you have to respect the speed of Jeremiah Smith, the talent. Will Howard's become better and better passer. And if they're going to go into the game not, playing a ton of man and just not covering Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka, like doesn't matter what you do on offense, you're not going to be able to keep up with them. And Oregon just fell behind so quickly, so much. Yeah. They just had no chance of coming back. Even if they did wake up completely in the second half, it didn't matter. The lead was too big. So, and maybe I think the one pause for me in Ohio State is that like Tennessee to me was not a top tier team, right? They made the playoff, but they had to go at Ohio State in cold weather. Not surprised they got blown out. Then you get Oregon, who had to sit for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe there's that kind of like too many days off type factor.
I mean, we talked about that on the show before the playoffs started, about that's a long time to be off before you're getting into games, and it could affect teams.
I could see reasons. We could go back and forth about why one thing could happen versus another. Yeah. The great thing about this is we ended up with 2 great matchups. I think the national championship is going to be a great game, regardless of who's playing in it. And you get like storied programs that have a lot of tradition and a lot of past success that like have huge fan base. The numbers for these are going to be insane in terms of TV ratings. So I think everybody's a winner here. Media, college football, fans, etc. So I think going into this is about as good of a win as we can get.
We certainly hope so, because let's face it, we had a lot of stinkers so far in the college football playoff.
There were some bad ones. Thank God for gambling. That's all I have to say, right? If you can bet on props, you can make anything interesting.
Yep. And thank God for that gambling. Let's get into it without further ado, because let's face it, we monologued for a while there, but let's get started. We're going to be looking at the Notre Dame Penn State game first. And we're seeing a little bit of another Riley Leonard over.
Death taxes and Riley Leonard overs. Yeah, we have him at 7 yards per attempt. That's not an egregious amount. Like, it's not the craziest of numbers. I wouldn't bet this like a 31% edge. I have personally hit it, but I have not. Like, I'm not going crazy on it like I would a typical 30% edge. Jeremiah Love is the big issue here, right? He's the running back for them that continued to beat us all year because he would break a 80-yard touchdown run every week. But he's not going to be playing. Oh, I should say this. He is injured. He has not finished a game in 3 straight games. Mm-hmm. And he said against Georgia to the sideline reporter, I can't cut, but I don't need to cut to be explosive. Like, all right, dude, whatever. And then their head coach comes out, Marcus Freeman, says, we expect him to play. Well, they have a big brace on him like they have. I don't believe it. We have him projected for, I think, like 6 carries. This feels like one of those games where he gives it a go and he just doesn't finish. I just don't see how he could be so banged up consistently the past month, play a strong, tough defense that's super physical, and then make it out alive. That just feels very atypical for me to think would be happening in this matchup. So that's the big reason why we're not sinking Notre Dame, is because there is you have to kind of go with some context here. So we're thinking he gets 6 carries. We don't think he's going to be as effective as he has been in the past. And because of it, we like the unders. I mean, this under on his rushing line, Tom, it opened at like 54.5 or something like that, got up to 61.5, and now it's all the way down to 36.5, 35.5 in places. So I think the general public agrees that he's banged up. He's not going to be anywhere near full strength.
And so with that, does that mean that we want to go to? Does that mean that we want to go more so towards, towards the Riley Leonard overs?
I think that the reason why I brought it up is because I think there is a route to where they pass more. I think Riley Leonard is going to run the same amount as usual. Do they want to give Jadarian Price a ton of carries? Do they want to give the true freshman Aeneas Williams a bunch of carries? I would lean, they probably don't want to hammer those guys heavy. But at the same time, Riley Leonard's an experienced player. I think there's a route where they pass it more than, the last month or two. But I think Jadarian Price, this over of 50.5 or 52.5, 54.5, I think those are all good bets in the rushing game there, because he's a good running back. The numbers don't suggest that he, like in the playoffs, is a great running back. He ran for 3.7 against Georgia, 2.9 against Indiana, but he had a ton of good games in the regular season. 9.5 yards per carry against USC, 5.5 against A&M, like 10.5 against Purdue. Like, this guy can run the football, and I like the opportunity for him. And so I personally like the overs on him. And if you can get, if you can get the love under at a good number, I think that's a good bet as well.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things in the rushing market here. How about the receiving market? What are you thinking there?
So we're going to fairly positive. Fairly positive. We like some overs on these guys. Not super surprising. We're pretty high on Riley Leonard, obviously, right? So looking at it, right, we have Jaden Greathouse, Bo Collins, Mitchell Evans is not an edge, but those are some of the big guys in the past game. We like 2 overs there, Collins and Greathouse. That's just such a small number, and we think they're going to sling it a little bit. They're going to be successful. 7 yards per attempt is not a crazy amount. And so we like the overs there because it's just such a small number. That's a volatile bet, though. Those are 2 to 3 targets. What's he do with 2 targets type of thing. So be careful there. If you scroll down a little bit there, we got Jordan Faison. We have him as the projected number 1 receiver. Go figure. He's really the only under we like. But this is not a passing attack that's going to throw it a ton to one guy. Faison has seen the majority of the targets in the last couple games, but we're not talking about consistently 8+ targets. We're talking a game of 10, a game of 4, a game of 3, a game of 6. So those are just that type of number. And it's a 43.5 number. That's fairly high for what we think his usage will be, which will be around 20% of targets.
Yeah. Going to be a tricky one, but I feel like with Jeremiah Love in this condition, I feel like they have to lean on the passing attack if you're Notre Dame.
I wouldn't surprise me. The only issue there is like, do they do what they did against Georgia, which is just like sit on the football, play mistake-free football, and not worry about it? They threw 24 times for 90 yards.
Jesus.
It's not great. It was not great, but at the same time, too, it just didn't feel like they tried to push it. If you're going to bet a Riley over or some of these receiver overs, you certainly would want Penn State to get ahead early, to kind of push Notre Dame to try to do different things and not make this kind of game in the trenches of running the football constantly like they did against Georgia. Georgia made that mistake at the end of the first half that cost them a touchdown. Then they gave up a kick return for touchdown to start the second half. There was just no way Riley Leonard in the passing attack was really going to take any sort of chances or risk anything in the passing game once they got that big lead.
Yeah. And then Daniel saying, I think the thing about the UGA game was that the defense created enough turnovers, which they did. Are they going to be able to do that against Penn State? It allowed Notre Dame to shorten the game. We will have to see. It's going to be an interesting one with the game script here.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Daniel. I mean, Gunnar Stockton is a different quarterback than Drew Aller. Like Drew Aller's, for as much as I think is overrated and just not like that type of great quarterback, like he can throw the football a little bit. They're going to be successful in the passing game a little bit. Like they're going to push Notre Dame to do some different things. Notre Dame, I don't think, is just going to be able to just play bully ball, run it 45 times, and just get out of there. Notre Dame's going to have to win the game. They're not going to be able to just let Penn State lose.
Yeah. All right. Anything else that you want to hit here on the Notre Dame Penn State angle? Should we move on?
So there's two bets that we always push and talk about. Mm-hmm. It's always Riley Leonard overs. And telling you right now, Ben and I spend like hours and hours trying to figure out like how this algorithm does this. The other is if you go to rushing attempts, and this one has actually been super successful for like the past 6 weeks. Katron Allen over attempts has hit a bunch this season. He is definitely trending as the running back one. He's kind of your bully, bigger running back, like real thick guy. He breaks tackles, but he doesn't break long ones type of thing. But he gets some good usage. That's why we like his over on attempts and like his under in the rushing yards, because we just think he's going to get a bunch of usage here at 14.2 attempts compared to Singleton at 12. Singleton's that really explosive player. And it seems like every single week we like the over on Allen for attempts and the under on Singleton. And that one's like ranked pretty true. That one's been pretty good to us for the last month. If you can get this Jeremiah Love under 8.5 attempts, I love that bet.
Hey, shout out the ESPN bet.
Yeah, ESPN bet's giving us some good ones. I think the under there makes a ton of sense. And then even Jadarian Price over 11.5 attempts. Like I said, against USC, he had a great game. He played like basically a half of football, and he had 12 attempts. Like he can be a successful running back, and I think they will give him a good amount of carries consistently throughout.
All right. Should we head over to the Ohio State side, Chris?
Let's do it. Yeah. I think we're going to get consistent theme of unders here. Yeah. So we like unders on both Ewers and Howard. I mean, Ewers under was going to hit until the I think we actually liked the over, and it hit right around the same number, around 245, 250. And it hit basically because they went to overtime, and you can't really project that type of thing. So we were pretty on par with kind of that number of where it's going to be. Ewers against Ohio State. Ohio State's secondary is solid. Their defensive line, like we saw against Oregon, is really, really strong. So we like the under there. Same with Will Howard. You just have to hope that Texas comes out and realizes that like they have insane players at receiver for Ohio State, which I would imagine they do. They have a really strong secondary. We talked about it last week. I think basically every single week they gave up like 170 yards through the air, so just the full season, they've been really good against the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what Ohio State is going to have to do if they want to win in this one. So let's head to that receiving market here. Anything that that's particularly jumping out at you in this receiving yards?
We get the volatile running back market of Travion under 23.5 yards. As always, be careful there. G. Scott is the same type of guy. He's going to get probably 2, maybe 3 targets. What's he do with them type of thing. So be careful there. And then we have a Quinshon Judkins over half of a yard receiving. That's just wild. I think by principle, you almost have to take that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, half a yard is, it's just one bad screenplay and you're there. But yeah, so some different ones there. Jaden Blue is another volatile under, but I actually tend to like that one. He's seen a lot lower usage when Wisner is healthy, which he should be. No reason for him not to be after a really heavy amount of usage last week against Arizona State.
Mm-hmm.
But we like unders across the board on Ohio State guys. I would just say if you can get behind that Howard under in the passing game, then there's no reason not to like the unders on these receivers. Like Buka is kind of your possession type slot guy. That's probably the one I like the most. Jeremiah Smith is the super freak, fast, tall, long, lanky, great receiver. That one's a little bit harder to swallow when he's that good of a talent. And then Carnell Tate has really dipped off. There was a period where Carnell Tate was getting all the targets, or the most of the three. Last couple games, I want to say he's only got 4 targets. So, under 38.5, for a guy that was the receiver 3 genuinely and could see, just 2 or 3 targets. That's a good bet as well. But you have to be behind that Texas defense, which we, as a group definitely agree with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uno Mas in the chat saying Sark has got to run the ball. And yeah, the rush game is going to be really important here for Texas if they want to try and pound it up the middle on a very physical Ohio State defense here. But let's talk about those rushing markets. TreVeyon Henderson obviously giving us a big pop here, but are we going back to the Wisner well?
I think you have to. The only game that, he just wasn't successful. And I think part of that was the O-line health beating him up against Arizona State. But I think that's a great over, 59.5, 57.5 in some of these places. I think that's a great over. I think he ran 15 for 48, but the run game was just not going at all against Arizona State. We really have him as the running back 1 compared to Blue. It was great to get a game where both were healthy, and we saw Wisner get the most carries of that group. Last game, in that game, he had 18 carries to Jaden Blue's 4, right? Why would they differ from that at this point, right? And Jaden Blue was 4 for 4. It wasn't a super successful day on the ground. So I probably would avoid that Blue bet personally, but I love the Wisner bet. Then same thing with Henderson. Henderson's line is in the low 40s. This guy, I think he popped a 60 or 70 yard touchdown against Oregon. He can hit that number in 1 run, but almost assuredly he's going to get 10 to 11 attempts. So he has plenty of shots at it. Yeah, Judkins is another guy. Both these teams love running the football if they can, and they want to get a little bit physical. So, and we think they will be successful. So yeah, Judkins, another guy, a little bit more, not as big of a explosive type guy, but he's going to get more carries than Henderson, which certainly helps.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, the Henderson line, if that's, I'm trying to look it up right now on MGM because it's moved. It's 47.5 on MGM now. It's not 43. I don't know what quite is going on there, but what do you think? 47.5 still, we're still seeing an edge. We got 49.5 there.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet. Ultimately, obviously you want the best number possible, right? Mm-hmm. But the difference between 43.5 and 47.5 for a guy with his talent and skill set probably isn't going to matter all that much. Either he's going to be successful or he's not. And, so I like the over there still at 47.5, even 50.5. I think you don't want to get the worst line of the bunch, but 50.5 is still just a fine bet. And then
I highly recommend anyone take try and take a middle here because this is absolutely about to not hit it's about to hit the 47 and not hit the 50. Guaranteed.
Well, I mean, hey, if you can get a middle, you like doing that. Why not? What's really nice about this is I think we get another great rushing attempt line on Wisner. If you want to go to the rushing attempt market, you want to talk about predicting what's going to happen, right? If we can bet receptions or attempts, we try to do that all the time, right? Only a 63% edge on that Wisner over on ESPN bet.
So we're definitely saying for Natish here, we're saying Wisner attempts for sure here.
I would definitely go attempts. If you are going to put a decent bid on these games, maybe you kind of half it or go 1.5 on one, on the attempts and half on the yardage. But Wisner to me is not the type where he's going to pop off that big run and it salvage the day type of thing on one run. Whereas Henderson, it's plus money, so that's really intriguing at ESPN Bet. But that one is a little bit tighter for sure. I think I'd definitely go with the yardage over the attempts, considering his skill set. I mean, I think he only had like 4 carries against Oregon, but he ran for something like 75 yards. So that gives you a little bit of insight. If they did go heavy on Judkins, I think I would lean on the yards for Henderson, but the attempts for Wisner.
Yeah. Rob, we're looking into it on MGM there for you. I'm not sure what is going on with it right now.
Don't do that. Don't do that, gambler.
Don't do that.
Well, remember against Clemson, Wisner was incredible and he got banged up. And I want to say the line was 15.5 or 16.5. And he got hurt and it got, I think, maybe one more carry and he ended at 15. And didn't play most of the second half. So that's what you worry about. But yeah, I mean, that's a great bet to me. I think that one and the Henderson over yards are those are two of my favorite bets of the whole semifinal. I think you take away any sort of volatility of like the injury with Love. What does Notre Dame's offense do? Right. You look at like Penn State, we know who Penn State is. I love that Katron Allen rush attempt over as well. But like, you would talk about a big edge that really feels like a genuinely good big edge. That Henderson rush yards on the Wisner attempt over is great.
Yeah, those are definitely two. Well, I mean, of course, those are going to be two of my favorites because I am just going off of you here. Uno Mas says Helm anytime TD. What do you think?
Not bad. I mean, you'd have to give me the odds, right? I mean, he didn't do anything the entire game until the fourth quarter, late in the game, right? A couple Texas receivers were like that. So, Ryan Wingo is another guy that didn't really do anything until the very end. So, they got salvaged a little bit by some OT, but they definitely love throwing to Gunnar Helm. He's the top 2 target for them overall. One thing to note is Isaiah Bond, the receiver. We have him limited. He played last week against Arizona State, but didn't get a whole lot of action. So maybe go to receiving yards. I'm curious what kind of line we have or people have for Bond out there. Nothing. Let's type in Wingo for me if you don't mind. Ryan Wingo played a good bit of snaps. We like the under, and someone had mentioned like in a DM me about it. Like if Bond is not going to play a whole lot, why would we like the under on Wingo? And really, it's because he's still kind of like that fourth target between the tight end and Matthew Golden, DeAndre Moore. There's a bunch of mouths there to feed. They do like throwing to the running backs in the passing game. So a lot of mouths to feed. And if Wingo didn't have back-to-back catches in the fourth quarter last week, he just like Helm, he would end with 0 yards on the game. So, yours loves a deep ball to Golden and Bond. But Bond, I think he's playing through something because he's barely touched the field. And coming into the season, he was considered the number 1 guy in the offense. Yeah. So it's been a little odd to see him fall off in terms of usage. It has to be tied to a lingering injury.
And for what it's worth here with Wingo, like 2 receptions and to get 25 yards on that, the 21 line is not bad, but 25 yards on Fliff, that is very, very high for a 2 reception guy.
Yeah, I mean they play around with him with end arounds, with speed sweep, like a kind of like the jet pass type action. They did throw downfield a little bit with him, but like the comment a minute ago, right? Like he's not their top downfield threat. Gunnar Helm is great downfield. Golden, Bond, like they have a lot of guys that can play that role. Wingo can a little bit, but he's a true freshman. Do they lean on him against a tougher OSU defense? Probably not. So that's a 4% bet that I think I'd 4% edge that I think I'd actually bet. Usually we say 5% and over, but that's one that if I wanted some extra action in Texas, I wouldn't mind that one bit.
Yeah, and shout out to Fliff for being so stale on this line because 25.5 is absurd when the rest of the market's at 21.
Yeah, that's a decent gap. That's a decent difference considering such a low number to begin with. So
yeah.
Anything in receptions out of curiosity?
Let's find out. I was about to ask you the same thing, my friend. So
I think G. Scott was one that I had seen this morning. He's the tight end for Ohio State. In terms of like how deep we like his under on the yardage, but I think we'd like his over on the reception, maybe just a little bit. But let's see here. You get some plus money ones. Plus money ones always make it a little bit tough because it kind of not skews the numbers, but it really pushes you to bet on a super tight line. But like
you
Jaden
have to
Blue,
remember, plus money is bad for the record, good for the bankroll.
right? Exactly. That's a good way to think about it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to lose more of those than win in the long run. But like Great House, right? If you lean towards what you're saying, Tom, like if they pass more than we think they will, like Great House will get 2 catches.
Yeah.
But then I would avoid face on, right? Like I think if they're going to lean towards a heavier pass game, I think Great House is a great bet there. Bo Collins is good bet. I don't like minus 168, but that's a good bet considering he was the receiver 1 for half the season. So a couple interesting ones there to target for sure.
Yeah. All right. Anything else that you really have your eye on here? I know Natish wants to know about Harrison Wallace unders. What do you think there?
We like him. Yeah. I mean, he's their best receiver. Amari Evans has kind of popped in and been a guy that's getting some good usage and making some nice plays as well. But Notre Dame's defense is like super strong. So I like the defense. We like the under. I want to say ETR established the run even said like under on him as well. So I think there's kind of a consensus. Maybe that number's moved. Maybe click on that 42.5 at FanDuel and see if that line is adjusted.
Oh, yeah. It's been all over the place.
Today, yeah, 48.5 earlier and now down to 42.5. So somebody was betting it.
Yeah. You still got Splash with the 48.5 up if you want to take advantage of that.
Yeah. And there was actually one on the we talked about Wingo. The Wingo 2.5 receptions. That's a high one, I think. So if you want to if you tend to be like most of our subscribers in Discord, like the receptions instead of yards, you have to pay up a little bit at minus 150. But
yeah,
under 2.5 is a strong bet.
Like, is he really getting 3 passes in this game? Yeah.
He had 3 targets last game, but that was like, that was a game that went down to the wire. And they couldn't run the football. So they had to pass it maybe a little bit more than they originally intended. So yeah, I think that's a good one as well.
Exactly. All right, Chris, anything else that we really want to look at here? I mean, we only had the 2 games, so we knew we weren't going to be going a full hour today like we have on the normal slates, but final thoughts for you on our matchups.
I think this will be a great, I'm like actually genuinely excited about like watching the actual game just as much as I am like watching the props, which is fun. Sometimes
yeah, there's going to be a lot of fun in these 2 games.
Yeah. Sometimes you get like, oh, I'm excited to watch these props play out. And sometimes you get, oh, this is actually like a cool matchup. So we get that this weekend. If you wanted a fun, like anytime touchdown bet, somebody had mentioned, I think Gunnar Helm earlier, right? I think if you can get a good number on Jadarian Price, the running back that benefits from Jeremiah Love being hurt, I think Jadarian Price, anytime touchdown is great. He's the running back for Notre Dame. So, I mean, I think that'd be a fun one to go after. I don't think there's any real ladder opportunities, but I think you just hit the typical plays. You enjoy the games, and hopefully we come back again for that championship and and have a great matchup. Who do you think is going to be in the championship? Ohio State and who?
I think it's Ohio State, Notre Dame, but all the talk, the flu, all that stuff, I'm starting to think we might get the Ohio State Penn State rematch.
I wouldn't want that personally.
I don't want it either.
I think Ohio State is just much better than Penn State.
Yeah. I think that this Ohio State Texas game is kind of like, the game that should be the championship. This is the fun one, and we'll see what happens in the final. But I think it's going to be Ohio State versus most likely Notre Dame. But I mean, that game's almost a toss. That game is a toss up.
Is it? Yeah, it is. I think I'm with you on that boat. As much as I like kind of propped up Texas earlier, like Ohio State's almost a touchdown favorite for a reason. If Ohio State's -6 against Texas, like they're probably going to be closer to like -9 or 10 against Notre Dame, don't you think?
Yeah, I think this is the fun week, and next week just kind of sucks.
Well, you never know. Probably, sometimes defense does win out, and that would be the way that Notre Dame wins it is if defense really comes to play.
I will say if Ohio State does make the final, I am going to be doing the same thing I've done in many previous seasons and just absolutely laddering them to dominate the game. I don't think it's going to be quite as big as we saw with like the Georgia Washington, Georgia Washington,
TCU.
yeah, Georgia
TCU.
TCU.
Yeah, that was a
Like,
bummer.
That
That game
wasn't
was
a bummer.
over. I watched with a bunch of Georgia fans, and like they didn't even, like the wind was taken out of the room like immediately. I mean, not that you don't love a championship win, but it was like, man, this game is like literally over.
Yeah. I mean, I loved it because I had a whole bunch of stuff on Georgia. Like I laid the house on Georgia, and then I went back in at halftime and I said, they've been playing the backup since the second quarter and they haven't been stopping them either. I don't think that it matters that they're taking the foot off the gas. They're still going to put up the points. So I went back in on Georgia's second half numbers and won a bunch more money.
I think there's a decent chance that happens. So yeah, Chad, I think so. I don't think that's like a huge bet, but at plus 185, I think that's a good bet. Yeah, I think I would throw down on that if I could myself.
Mm-hmm. All right. We do have one more question here because the gambler wants to know any ladders we should look into. So let's get on ladder watch before we get out of here.
So ladder watch. I think if you're going to do ladders, it needs to be in the Ohio State Texas game.
Yeah.
I would look at a guy like Travion Henderson, who we've talked about, we love. So that's probably where I'd lean towards. Is that it lines up exactly with kind of what our props like anyways, like the over. So I think that's the area I'd like to go with is Henderson over. If you wanted to go against our props, I think like if there's an Ohio State receiver that could hit the ladder that like would make it worth it is like
if
Carnell
you say
Tate.
Wingo, I'm going to kill you.
No. Carnell Tate. Just because like everything points to him being the receiver 3, getting, 3-4 targets, but like if he kind of gets that mid-season strong 6-7 targets, like he's a really good receiver and his number is low enough where it makes it fun, right? Like his numbers in the 30s, right? It's not really fun to ladder Jeremiah Smith and his 84.5 yards, right? Like how much are we really going to profit off of that is more my thought.
As I'm doing absolutely great in pulling up these numbers here right now.
Here we go.
I literally was like, okay, I'm going to put in Tate. Why is nothing? Oh yeah, Ohio State. It's just searching for the 4.
Yeah,
so of course
you're looking at everybody. So yeah, I think Tate is interesting strictly because he's super talented. If the game does get like pass happy, scoring happy, like 99.5 yards is not a crazy number for a guy that, is talented in this offense. Yeah. It would go against everything that we like in terms of it, right? That's kind of like the bummer about that ladder, but I think Travion Henderson again is that number 1.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to do it for us here on the show. We will be back for the College Football National Championship. We will see who is going to be in it. But for now, thank you guys so much for an amazing season. We've got 3 more great games to get through. Let's make some more money on them and have a great start to 2025. Chris, thanks for joining me. Thank you to everyone in the chat for being here, for asking your questions, for Daniel Colpoys for just digging me, just absolutely digging me here. It's okay. I love you guys. All right. That is going to do it. We're going to get out of here, but we'll be back next week for the national. Well, I suppose it would be not next week then.
It's a Monday night game, so
I'm going to guess that we're going to do a Monday show.
Well, I'm down. If you're down. I think it's MLK Day, right? So I'm off that day, so even better.
Perfect. Well, I am definitely not off, but we will for sure be doing a show. We'll be back here most likely at our usual time of 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern. And of course, stick around for tomorrow at noon because we will have Wild Card Weekend with Derek Carty talking some NFL props at our usual time tomorrow. But for now, that is going to do it for us. Best of luck, everybody, on these college football semifinals. We'll see you next week, and let's cash some tickets.